The dust cloud rose behind the departing wagons like a mocking wave goodbye, and Zara Sullivan felt her heart drop into her stomach as she watched the last canvas top disappear over the ridge, while she stood beside her broken wheel in the merciless afternoon sun of September 1876. She had been traveling with the Henderson wagon train for 3 months, making their way from Missouri to Oregon Territory. And now here she was, 22 years old and utterly alone on the Colorado plains because her axle had snapped clean through, and the wagon master had declared they couldn't afford to wait another day for repairs. The other families had looked at her with pity, some with relief that it wasn't their problem, and within an hour they had rolled on without her, leaving her with a crippled wagon, her few possessions, and the terrible knowledge that she was completely stranded in country where the nearest settlement was at least 2 days' ride away. Zara pressed her hands against her dusty skirts and fought back the tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Her father had always told her that Sullivan women were made of sterner stuff, right up until the fever had taken him last winter and left her with nothing but debts, and the desperate hope that her aunt in Oregon City would take her in. She had sold everything she owned to buy passage with the Henderson train and outfit herself with supplies for the journey. Now all of that was meaningless because she was stuck here with a wagon that would never roll again and no way to catch up to people who clearly didn't care whether she lived or died. The sun beat down with relentless intensity, and Zara knew she needed to think practically. She had maybe 3 days of water if she was careful, a week's worth of food, and absolutely no idea how to repair a broken axle even if she had the tools and materials. The smart thing would be to salvage what she could carry and start walking, but walking where? The wagon train had been heading northwest toward the mountains. There had been talk of a settlement called Silverton somewhere in these parts, a mining town tucked up in the San Juan Mountains, but she had no map and no certainty of which direction to go. She was still standing there, trying to formulate some kind of plan, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Her first instinct was fear, because a woman alone was vulnerable to all manner of dangers. But then she told herself that standing here frozen with terror wasn't going to help anything. She straightened her spine, brushed the worst of the dust from her dark blue traveling dress, and shaded her eyes to see who was coming. The rider appeared as a dark silhouette against the bright sky, sitting tall in the saddle on a rangy sorrel horse. As he drew closer, Zara could make out more details. A broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun, a dark vest over a work-worn shirt, and the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. He slowed as he approached, and she saw his hand rest casually on his thigh, near but not on the revolver that hung at his hip. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried clearly in the still air. He pulled his horse to a stop about 10 feet away, giving her space, which she appreciated. "Looks like you have got some trouble here." Zara lifted her chin and tried to sound more confident than she felt. "My axle broke. The wagon train I was traveling with decided they could not wait for repairs." The cowboy pushed his hat back slightly, and she got her first clear look at his face. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw shadowed with a few days' growth of beard, and eyes that were a striking gray-green, like sage after rain. There was something steady in his gaze, something that made her feel slightly less panicked. "They left you here alone." His tone carried a note of disapproval. "That is cold, even for a wagon master in a hurry." "I suppose they had their reasons," Zara said, though she didn't really believe it. "I cannot exactly blame them for not wanting to lose time." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with fluid ease and walked slowly toward the wagon, giving her plenty of time to object if she wanted to. When she didn't, he crouched down to examine the broken axle, running his hand along the splintered wood. "This is not getting fixed out here," he said finally, standing and dusting off his hands. "You would need a blacksmith and new parts, and even then it might not be worth the effort depending on the rest of the wagon's condition." "I see," Zara said quietly. She had already known that, but hearing it confirmed made it feel terribly final. The cowboy studied her for a long moment, and she found herself unable to look away from those steady eyes. "I am Owen Dalton," he said. "I've got a ranch about 20 miles south of here, near the foothills. I was heading back from delivering some horses to a buyer in Sterling when I saw your wagon." "Zara Sullivan," she replied automatically. "I was traveling to Oregon to live with my aunt." "That is a fair distance to be going alone," Owen said. "I was not alone until a few hours ago," Zara pointed out. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Owen's weathered face. "Fair point." He glanced at the sun, which was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. "Miss Sullivan, I am not going to leave you out here to die. You will travel with me now. I can get you to Silverton by tomorrow evening. It is a mining town up in the mountains, rough around the edges but decent enough. From there you can figure out your next move, maybe catch another wagon train or book passage on a stage." Zara felt a rush of relief so strong it made her knees weak, but years of her father's warnings about accepting help from strangers made her hesitate. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dalton, but I do not know you. For all I know, you could be leading me into worse trouble than I am already in." Owen nodded slowly, as if he had expected that response. "You are right to be cautious. I can tell you that I have run the Double D Ranch for 5 years now, that I am known in Silverton and most of the surrounding territory, and that I have got 2 sisters back in Kansas, who would skin me alive if I left a woman stranded in the middle of nowhere. But I understand if that is not enough for you. The alternative is you stay here and hope someone else comes along, or you try to walk to the nearest settlement carrying whatever you can manage. Neither of those options seems particularly safe to me, but it is your choice." Zara looked at the broken wagon, then at the empty prairie stretching in all directions, then back at Owen Dalton. He stood there patiently, not pushing, not crowding her, just waiting for her to decide. There was something in his face that she wanted to trust, a quiet decency that she hoped she was reading correctly and not just projecting out of desperation. "What about my things?" she asked. "I have everything I own in that wagon." "Take what you can carry in a bag," Owen said. "Anything too heavy or bulky will have to stay. I know that is not ideal, but my horse cannot carry double plus a heavy load all the way to Silverton." Zara nodded, accepting the practicality of it, even though it hurt to think about abandoning the last remnants of her old life. She climbed into the back of the wagon and began sorting through her belongings with ruthless efficiency. She packed a carpet bag with her spare dress, undergarments, her mother's Bible, the small bundle of letters from her aunt, a few pieces of jewelry that had sentimental value, and a tintype photograph of her parents. Everything else, the cooking pots, the extra blankets, her father's books, the little luxuries she had allowed herself would have to be left behind. When she emerged with her bag, Owen was checking his horse's saddle and securing his own pack more tightly. He glanced at her burden and nodded. "That should work. Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be," Zara said. Owen mounted first, then reached down to help her up. His hand was calloused and strong, and he lifted her onto the horse behind him as if she weighed nothing. Zara had never ridden like this before, seated behind a man on horseback, and she felt acutely self-conscious about having to hold onto him to keep her balance. "You will want to put your arms around my waist," Owen said matter-of-factly. "It is going to be a long ride, and you will be sore enough tomorrow without having to work so hard to stay on." Zara hesitated only a moment before wrapping her arms around his solid torso. She could feel the warmth of him even through his vest and shirt, and she tried not to think too hard about how strange and intimate this was. Instead, she focused on the fact that he had offered her help when she desperately needed it, and that dwelling on propriety seemed ridiculous under the circumstances. Owen urged his horse into a steady walk, angling southwest toward the mountains that rose in blue-gray ridges against the horizon. For the first hour they rode in silence, and Zara found herself gradually relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air began to cool as evening approached. "We will ride until dark, then make camp," Owen said over his shoulder. "I have got supplies for a fire and food enough for two. Tomorrow we will get an early start and should reach Silverton by late afternoon." "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "I know I already said it, but thank you for stopping." "You did not have to help me. Could not have lived with myself if I had ridden past," Owen replied. "Besides, it is not every day a man gets to play rescuer. Makes me feel downright heroic." There was a hint of humor in his voice, and Zara found herself smiling despite everything. "Well, you are my hero today, Mr. Dalton, whether you want the title or not." "Owen," he said, "if you are going to be holding on to me for the next day or so, seems like we can skip the formalities." "Owen," Zara agreed, "and you can call me Zara." As darkness fell, Owen guided them to a sheltered spot beneath a stand of cottonwoods near a small creek. He helped Zara down from the horse, and she was grateful for the solid ground beneath her feet, even though her legs felt shaky and strange after hours in the saddle. Owen unsaddled his horse and let it drink and graze while he gathered wood for a fire. Zara, determined not to be useless, unpacked the few supplies he had indicated and tried to make herself helpful. Soon they had a cheerful fire crackling between them, and Owen produced coffee, hardtack, and salt pork from his supplies. It was not fancy, but Zara was hungry enough that it tasted wonderful. They ate in companionable silence, and then Owen poured them each a cup of strong black coffee. "So what happened to make you head all the way to Oregon?" Owen asked, his tone casual but interested. Zara wrapped her hands around the warm tin cup and considered how much to share. "My father died last winter. He was a clerk in St. Louis, never made much money, but we got by. When he passed, I found out he had debts I did not know about. I had to sell almost everything to settle them. My mother's sister lives in Oregon City with her husband. She wrote and said I could come stay with them, help with their children and the house. It seemed like my best option." "That is rough," Owen said. "I am sorry about your father." "Thank you," Zara said. She took a sip of coffee and felt the warmth spread through her chest. "What about you? How does a man end up ranching in Colorado territory?" Owen smiled slightly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I grew up in Kansas, third of 4 children. My father had a farm, but it was never going to support all of us. When I was 18, I headed west to make my own way. Worked as a ranch hand, a drover, spent a season hunting buffalo, did whatever paid. 5 years ago, I found a valley down near the foothills that just spoke to me, you know. Good water, good grass, room to grow. I filed a claim, built a cabin, and started gathering horses. I have got about 50 head now, plus some cattle. It is not a big operation, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, and Zara found herself respecting that. He had built something from nothing, carved out a life through hard work and determination. She wondered what that felt like, to have that kind of independence and purpose. You ever get lonely? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately felt foolish. I am sorry, that is too personal. No, it is a fair question, Owen said. He stared into the fire for a moment. Yes, sometimes. It is beautiful country and I love the work, but it can be isolating. I go into Silverton every few weeks for supplies and to visit friends. There is a widow woman named Sarah Chen who runs a boarding house there, and she feeds me and tells me all the gossip and generally mothers me. A couple of the local ranchers and I help each other during busy seasons. So I've got connections, but yeah, there are nights when it would be nice to have someone to talk to besides my horse and my dog. You have a dog? Zara asked, latching onto the less melancholy part of his statement. I do. Blue, a cattle dog. Left him at the ranch this trip since I knew I would be gone a while. He is probably sulking right now, wondering where I went. Owen's smile was genuine and warm. Best working dog I ever had, but he has also got a streak of mischief a mile wide. They talked a while longer, easy conversation that helped Zara forget for a little while how drastically her circumstances had changed in just one day. Owen told her about life in Silverton, painting a picture of a rough but growing community centered around silver mining. Zara found herself drawn to his stories, to the way he described the mountains and the clear cold streams and the meadows full of wildflowers in summer. Eventually, Owen banked the fire and laid out his bedroll on one side of it. He offered Zara his spare blanket and pointed to a spot on the opposite side. You take that side, I will take this one. Fire stays between us. If anything bothers you in the night, you holler and I will deal with it. Thank you, Zara said, meaning it. She appreciated that he was being thoughtful about her comfort and safety. She settled into her blanket, using her carpetbag as a pillow, and stared up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. She could hear Owen's steady breathing across the fire, hear the occasional stamp of the horse and the rustle of night creatures in the grass. Despite everything, despite being in the middle of nowhere with a man she had just met, Zara felt safer than she had in months. Maybe it was foolish, maybe she was being naive, but her instincts told her that Owen Dalton was exactly what he seemed. A good man doing a decent thing. She fell asleep thinking about steady gray-green eyes and a quiet voice that promised help without demanding anything in return. Zara woke to the smell of coffee and the soft gray light of pre-dawn. Owen was already up, stirring the fire back to life and setting out breakfast. When he saw her sit up, he offered a quick smile. Morning. We have got a long day ahead, so eat up. They ate quickly and efficiently, then packed up camp and got back on the trail as the sun rose behind them. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled southwest, the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills, and then to steeper slopes covered in pine and aspen. The air grew cooler and thinner, and Zara found herself grateful for the warmth of Owen's back in front of her. Hours passed in a blur of changing scenery. Owen pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the territory. He showed her where a pack of wolves had denned the previous winter, where he had once helped rescue a mining crew caught in a rock slide, where the best fishing holes were hidden. Zara absorbed it all, fascinated by this world that was so different from everything she had known in St. Louis. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horse and eat a cold lunch. Zara slid down from the saddle and nearly fell when her stiff legs refused to support her properly. Owen caught her elbow, steadying her. First time riding all day, he asked. First time riding much at all, Zara admitted. I am going to be impossibly sore tomorrow, aren't I? Probably, Owen said, but his tone was sympathetic. Walking around a bit will help. Get your blood moving. They spent 20 minutes resting, and Zara forced herself to walk despite her protesting muscles. When they mounted up again, she noticed that Owen had adjusted his position slightly, giving her a more comfortable angle to hold on. It was a small thing, but it showed he was thinking about her well-being. The afternoon wore on, and the mountains grew larger and more imposing ahead of them. Zara had never seen peaks like these, jagged and dramatic, still holding snow on their highest reaches even though it was early September. Owen guided them into a narrow valley where a river ran cold and fast over smooth rocks. "We are getting close now," he said. "Another couple of hours and we will reach Silverton." As they climbed higher, following a rough trail that ran alongside the river, Zara began to see signs of human activity. First it was just stumps where trees had been cut. Then she spotted a crude mine shaft carved into the hillside. And then suddenly they rounded a bend and Silverton spread out before them. The town sat in a high valley surrounded by towering peaks, a collection of wooden buildings and tents clustered along the river. Zara could see several substantial structures that looked like hotels or saloons, a church steeple rising above the other buildings, and dozens of smaller cabins scattered across the slopes. Smoke rose from countless chimneys, and even from a distance she could hear the sounds of industry: hammering, sawing, the rumble of ore wagons on rough streets. "It is bigger than I expected," Zara said. "Silver brings people," Owen replied. 5 years ago this was nothing but wilderness. Now there are maybe 2,000 people here, and more arriving every week. It is chaotic and rough, but there is opportunity if you know where to look." He guided them down into the town, and Zara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as they navigated the crowded main street. Men in dusty work clothes stared at them as they passed, and Zara was acutely aware of how she must look after 2 days of hard travel. Owen seemed unbothered by the attention, nodding to a few people he recognized but not stopping until they reached a large 2-story building with a sign that read, "Chen's Boarding House." Owen dismounted and then helped Zara down. Her legs nearly buckled, but she managed to stay upright through sheer determination. A moment later, the front door of the boarding house opened, and a small woman with graying black hair and a no-nonsense expression appeared on the porch. "Owen Dalton," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent that Zara couldn't quite place. "You were supposed to be back 2 days ago. I was starting to worry." "Sorry, Sarah," Owen said. "I got delayed. I brought someone who needs help." Sarah Chen's sharp eyes moved to Zara, and her expression softened slightly. "Come inside, both of you. You look exhausted, dear." The interior of the boarding house was clean and welcoming, with simple but comfortable furnishings and the smell of something savory cooking in the kitchen. Sarah led them into a small sitting room and gestured for Zara to sit. "Now, what is this about?" Owen explained the situation concisely, and Sarah listened with a thoughtful expression. When he finished, she turned to Zara. "You poor thing, to be abandoned like that. Well, you are safe here now. I have got a room available, and you can stay as long as you need. We will figure out what comes next after you have had a chance to rest and recover." "I have some money," Zara said quickly, not wanting to be a charity case. "Not much, but I can pay for the room." "We will work something out," Sarah said briskly. "First things first, you need a hot bath and a proper meal. Owen, you are staying for dinner." It was not a question, and Owen grinned. Would not dream of refusing Sarah. The next few hours passed in a blur of comfort that Zara had not experienced in months. Sarah showed her to a small but spotlessly clean room on the 2nd floor, then arranged for a hot bath to be brought up. Zara sank into the steaming water with a groan of relief, feeling days of dust and tension soak away. She washed her hair and scrubbed herself clean, then dressed in her spare outfit, a simple gray dress that was wrinkled from being packed, but at least was not covered in trail dust. When she came back downstairs, she found Owen sitting at a large dining table, clean-shaven now and looking more relaxed. Sarah had prepared a feast: roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, green beans, and a pie that smelled of apples and cinnamon. They ate with several other boarders, miners and tradesmen who treated Sarah with obvious respect and affection. The conversation flowed easily, and Zara found herself laughing at stories and feeling more at ease than she had since leaving St. Louis. After dinner, Owen found her alone on the front porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. "I need to head back to my ranch in the morning," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "But I wanted to make sure you are all right before I go." "I am," Zara said honestly. "Thanks to you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did." Owen shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "You would have figured something out. You strike me as the resourceful type." "Maybe," Zara said, "but I am glad I did not have to find out." There was a moment of silence, not uncomfortable but charged with something Zara couldn't quite name. She found herself noticing details about Owen that she had been too stressed to register before. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the slight crinkle at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the strength in his hands as they gripped the porch railing. "What will you do now?" Owen asked. "Still planning to head to Oregon," Zara hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know. The idea of continuing on to Oregon felt less urgent now, but she also didn't have any other concrete plans. "I need to write to my aunt, let her know what happened. I suppose I will wait to hear back from her before I decide. In the meantime, maybe I can find work here to earn my keep." "Sarah always needs help running this place," Owen said. "And there are not many women in Silverton, so you would have your pick of jobs if you wanted them. The schoolteacher just left to get married, and the town council has been desperate to find a replacement." "Can you teach?" "I can read and write and do figures," Zara said. "My father made sure I had a good education. I have never taught before, but I could learn." "Something to think about," Owen said. He straightened and looked like he was preparing to leave. "I should let you get some rest, but Zara, I am glad you are safe." "Me too," she said softly. "Will I see you again?" "I come into town every few weeks," Owen said. "Maybe I will stop by and see how you are settling in." "I would like that," Zara said, and realized she truly meant it. Owen tipped his hat to her, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and charming, and then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness of the street. Zara stood on the porch a while longer, feeling strangely hollow now that he was gone. She told herself she was being foolish, that she barely knew the man, but there was no denying the connection she had felt during their journey together. The following days fell into a routine that was comforting in its predictability. Sarah put Zara to work helping with the boarding house, and Zara threw herself into the tasks with determination. She cooked, cleaned, mended linens, and helped serve meals to the boarders. Sarah paid her a small wage and reduced the cost of her room, and Zara felt like she was at least earning her place rather than accepting charity. She wrote to her aunt in Oregon, explaining what had happened and asking for advice. She also began exploring Silverton, getting to know the layout of the town and meeting its inhabitants. It was a rough place, just as Owen had said, with more saloons than churches and a transient population of miners who came and went with the seasons. But there were good people too, families trying to build something lasting, tradesmen plying their crafts, women who had followed their husbands west and were determined to create civilization in the wilderness. 3 weeks after her arrival, Zara was approached by 2 men who introduced themselves as members of the town council. They had heard she was educated and asked if she would be willing to take over the schoolhouse. The pay was modest but steady, and they would provide a small cabin for her to live in. Zara accepted, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement. She had never imagined herself as a teacher, but the idea appealed to her. She started teaching the following Monday, standing in front of 15 children ranging in age from 6 to 14. It was chaotic at first, and she made plenty of mistakes, but the children were eager to learn, and Zara found that she enjoyed the work. It gave her purpose and structure, and she began to feel like she was building something real in Silverton. Owen came into town 6 weeks after he had left her at Sarah's. Zara was in the general store buying supplies when she heard his voice behind her. "Heard you became the new school teacher. How is that working out?" She turned, and her heart did a little skip at the sight of him. He looked wind-burned and tired, with shadows under his eyes, but his smile was genuine. "It is working out well," she said, trying to sound casual even though she was absurdly happy to see him. "The children keep me busy." "That is good," Owen said. He paid for the few items he had selected, and then they walked out into the street together. "Are you glad you stayed?" "I am," Zara said. "My aunt wrote back and said she understood that I should do what feels right." "Silverton feels right, at least for now." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, and then Owen said, "Would you like to have dinner with me? I mean, not at the boarding house. There is a restaurant down the street, nothing fancy, but the food is decent." Zara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that very much." They ate at a small establishment run by a German couple, and the food was surprisingly good. They talked easily, catching up on the weeks they had been apart. Owen told her about life on his ranch, about breaking a new horse and dealing with a mountain lion that had been prowling around his cattle. Zara told him about her students, about the challenges and joys of teaching, about the friends she was making in town. As the evening wore on, Zara realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling for Owen Dalton. It wasn't just gratitude for him rescuing her, though that was part of it. It was the way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. It was his quiet strength, his dry humor, the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her. It was the way he treated her like an equal, never patronizing or dismissive. When he walked her back to her cabin that night, he stopped at her door and looked down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Can I see you again when I come to town next time?" "Yes," Zara said without hesitation. "Please." Owen's face broke into a grin that made him look years younger. "Good. That is real good, Zara." He left, and Zara went inside feeling like she was floating. She had not expected to find this when she came to Silverton. She had expected to be alone, to be starting over from nothing. Instead, she had found a place, a purpose, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something wonderful. Over the following months, Owen's visits to town became more frequent. He always made time to see Zara, and they fell into a pattern of dinners and long walks and conversations that stretched late into the evening. Zara learned more about him with each visit, about his difficult relationship with his father, who had thought ranching in Colorado was a foolish dream, about his sisters, who wrote him letters full of family news, about the loneliness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him when he was alone on his ranch for too long. She shared her own stories, too, about growing up as an only child, about her mother's death when she was 12, about the pressure she had felt to marry well, but never finding anyone who interested her. She told him about her dreams and fears, and he listened without judgment. Winter came to the mountains, fierce and beautiful. Snow piled high in the streets of Silverton, and the school had to close for a week when a blizzard made travel impossible. Zara spent the time holed up in her cabin, reading and preparing lessons and thinking about Owen, who was snowed in at his ranch. She worried about him being alone in the storm, but when the weather cleared and he made it to town, he laughed off her concerns. "I have weathered worse," he said, but she noticed he looked pleased that she had worried. It was on a cold January evening with snow falling softly outside that Owen finally kissed her. They had been sitting in her cabin, properly chaperoned by the presence of Sarah, who had stopped by earlier, but had conveniently found a reason to step outside for a few minutes. Owen had been in the middle of telling a story when he suddenly stopped, looking at Zara with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I have been wanting to do something for a while now," he said quietly, "but I have been trying to be respectful to give you time. Can I kiss you, Zara?" Her answer was to lean forward and close the distance between them. His lips were warm and gentle, and the kiss sent a shiver of pure joy through her entire body. When they pulled apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have loved you since I saw you standing there in the dust, refusing to give up even though you had every reason to. You are the strongest, bravest person I know, and I want you in my life. Not just for visits in town. I want you with me always." Zara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I was so afraid to hope for this, but I love you, Owen." They kissed again, deeper this time, and when Sarah came back inside, she took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "Well, it is about time," she said. "I was beginning to think you two would never figure it out." Owen proposed a week later, getting down on one knee in the snow outside her cabin and offering her a simple gold ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Zara said yes without a moment's hesitation, and they began planning a wedding for early spring, after the worst of the winter had passed, but before Owen would be too busy with ranch work. The wedding took place in late March, in the small church in Silverton, with what felt like the entire town in attendance. Zara wore a new dress that Sarah had helped her sew, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk. Owen wore his best suit, and he looked so handsome that Zara felt her heart swell with love and pride. They exchanged vows in front of friends and neighbors, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the boarding house with food and music and dancing. Zara had never felt so happy, surrounded by people who had become like family to her. As the evening wore on, Owen pulled her aside. "Ready to see your new home?" he asked, and Zara nodded eagerly. They rode out to the ranch together, taking the journey more slowly than they had on that first desperate trip. The valley where Owen had built his home was beautiful in the spring twilight, with wildflowers beginning to bloom and the sound of rushing water from the creek that ran through the property. The cabin was larger than Zara had expected, a solid structure with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. Owen carried her over the threshold, and she laughed at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Dalton," he said, setting her down gently. "It feels like home already," Zara said, looking around at the space that was now hers too. She could see Owen's personality in the simple furnishings, the books on the shelf, the neat organization of everything. But there was also room for her to add her own touches, to make this place truly theirs together. That night, they lay together in the bed Owen had built himself, wrapped in each other's arms while the wind whispered through the pines outside. Zara felt complete in a way she never had before, like she had finally found the place where she was meant to be. The months that followed were filled with hard work but also with deep contentment. Zara learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping Owen with the horses and cattle, tending a garden, managing the household. It was physically demanding work, but she thrived on it. She also continued to teach, riding into Silverton 3 days a week to work with her students, while Owen handled things at the ranch. They developed a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Owen never dismissed her opinions or treated her like she didn't understand ranch business. Instead, he asked for her input and listened to her ideas. Zara found herself learning about breeding horses, about reading weather patterns, about the 100 small skills required to survive in this rugged country. Their first summer together was marked by long days of sunshine and hard work. They drove a herd of horses to market in Denver, a week-long journey that tested their endurance but also brought them even closer together. They spent evenings sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the peaks in shades of gold and crimson, talking about their dreams for the future. In the fall, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening after dinner, feeling nervous about how he would react. His response was to pick her up and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Zara, we are going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Zara had to give up teaching in her last few months when travel became too difficult. Sarah came to visit regularly, bringing supplies and gossip from town and offering advice about childbirth. Owen was attentive to the point of being comically overprotective, and Zara had to keep reminding him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Their son was born in early June, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the cabin feel small and fragile. The labor was long and difficult, with only Sarah there to help since the weather had prevented them from getting to the doctor in town. But when Zara finally held her baby boy, all the pain faded into insignificance. He was perfect, with a thick shock of dark hair and lungs that proclaimed his arrival with impressive volume. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, cradling his son with a mixture of awe and terror on his face. "I was thinking James," Zara said, "after my father." "James Dalton," Owen said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, son." The next few years passed in a blur of diapers and sleepless nights and the overwhelming love that came with being parents. James was a happy baby who grew into an active toddler, keeping them constantly on their toes. The ranch prospered, with Owen building their herd and establishing a reputation for quality horses that drew buyers from across Colorado and beyond. Zara gave birth to a daughter when James was 3, a tiny girl with Owen's gray-green eyes whom they named Emma. 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they called Thomas. The cabin that had once seemed spacious now felt crowded, and Owen began planning an addition that would give them more room. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters where they struggled to keep the livestock fed, where the children got sick and Zara and Owen spent long nights nursing them through fevers. There were financial worries when horse prices dropped one year, and they had to tighten their belts and find ways to economize. There were disagreements and moments of frustration, because marriage was not always easy even when two people loved each other deeply. But through it all, Zara and Owen faced things together. They leaned on each other during the hard times and celebrated together during the good ones. They built a life that was rich in love if not always in material wealth. A life centered around family and hard work, and the deep satisfaction that came from creating something lasting. When Zara looked back on the day the wagon train had left her behind in the dust, she sometimes marveled at how different her life had turned out from what she had planned. If her axle had not broken, if Owen had not come riding along at exactly the right moment, if she had been too afraid to accept his help, she would have ended up in Oregon, probably married to some man her aunt had chosen for her, living a life that was perfectly adequate but not truly her own. Instead, she had found Owen, and with him she had found a kind of happiness she had not even known she was seeking. She had found a home in these rugged mountains, among people who were rough around the edges but whose hearts were genuine. She had found work that gave her purpose and children who filled her days with chaos and joy in equal measure. One evening in late summer, with the children finally asleep and the dishes done, Zara joined Owen on the porch. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, and the air was warm and sweet with the scent of pine. Owen put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Happy?" he asked, a question he had asked her countless times over the years. "Completely," Zara said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "You, more than I ever dreamed I could be," Owen said. He kissed the top of her head. "You know, I sometimes think about that day I found you in the middle of nowhere, and I wonder what would have happened if I had taken a different route or if I had decided not to stop. My whole life would be different." "Mine too," Zara said. "I would have missed all of this. You, the children, the ranch, everything that matters." "I am glad your wagon broke," Owen said, and then laughed at how terrible that sounded. "I mean, I am not glad you went through that ordeal, but I am glad it brought you into my life." "I am glad too," Zara said. She twisted to look up at him, at the face that had become more dear to her than her own. "I love you, Owen Dalton. Thank you for being the kind of man who would stop to help a stranger." "I love you too," Owen said, and kissed her properly, with the same passion and tenderness that had marked their first kiss all those years ago. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from a chance encounter on a dusty Colorado plain. Behind them, the cabin was full of sleeping children and the accumulated treasures of years of shared life. Ahead of them lay more years, more challenges, more joys. But in that moment, sitting on their porch with Owen's arm around her and the peaceful quiet of evening settling over the valley, Zara felt that life was exactly as it should be. She had been left behind once, abandoned and alone. But in being left behind, she had found her true path, her true home, and the love that would sustain her through all the years to come. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. James grew into a serious boy who loved working with the horses just like his father. Emma was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring the creek, giving Zara 100 small heart attacks a day. Thomas was the quiet one, thoughtful and observant, content to sit with a book or help his mother in the garden. When James turned 7, Zara started teaching the children herself at home, not wanting them to have to make the long ride into Silverton every day. She set up a small schoolroom in the new addition Owen had built, and the children spent their mornings learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. In the afternoons, they helped with ranch work, each child taking on responsibilities appropriate to their age and abilities. Owen's herd continued to grow, and with it their prosperity increased. They were never wealthy by the standards of city folk, but they had enough. They could afford to buy the things they needed, to hire hands during busy seasons, to save a little for the future. Owen built Zara a bigger garden shed and a proper chicken coop. They added onto the barn and built a second corral for breaking young horses. Sarah remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting the ranch several times a year and hosting them whenever they came to Silverton. She became a beloved adopted grandmother to the children, spoiling them with treats and stories and unconditional affection. She never married again after losing her husband years before, but she seemed content with her boarding house and her extended family of friends and boarders. When Zara was 32, she gave birth to one more child, another daughter they named Grace. The pregnancy had been unexpected, and Zara had worried about managing with 4 children, but Grace proved to be an easy baby who fit seamlessly into their busy household. Emma was delighted to have a baby sister, and the boys were protective and gentle with their youngest sibling. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Zara and Owen's love deepened with each passing year. They weathered storms, both literal and figurative. A terrible drought one summer that tested their water supply. A winter where Owen broke his leg and had to rely on hired help to keep things running. A bout of scarlet fever that swept through the valley and had them terrified for the children's lives. But they survived each challenge, sometimes by the skin of their teeth, but always together. Owen never lost his tendency to see the humor in difficult situations, and Zara never lost her determination to face problems head-on rather than avoiding them. They complemented each other perfectly, his calm steadiness balancing her passionate intensity, her practicality grounding his occasional flights of optimism. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, marked the changing seasons with the rituals of ranch life. They attended weddings and funerals of neighbors and friends, watched Silverton continue to grow and change, saw the wild territory gradually become more settled and civilized. The railroad reached Silverton when Emma was 8, bringing both opportunity and upheaval as the town's character began to shift through it all. The Double D Ranch remained their sanctuary, the place where they had built their life together. The valley never lost its power to move Zara, even after years of living there. She loved the way the aspens turned gold in fall, the way snow transformed everything into a winter wonderland, the riot of wildflowers that covered the meadows every spring. She loved the sound of the creek running over stones, the cry of hawks circling overhead, the distant bugling of elk during rutting season. But most of all, she loved the life she shared with Owen within this beautiful setting. She loved watching him work with the horses, patient and skilled and utterly focused. She loved the way he played with their children, getting down on the floor to wrestle with the boys or carefully braiding Emma's hair. She loved lying beside him at night, talking over the events of the day, or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of 2 people who knew each other completely. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised her by organizing a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, and the yard was filled with laughter and music and good food. Sarah had traveled out from Silverton despite her advancing age, bearing gifts and good wishes. The children had spent weeks helping their father prepare, decorating and cleaning and learning to play songs on the fiddle and guitar that Owen had taught them. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Zara stood with Owen watching the sunset from their favorite spot on the porch. The children were inside with Sarah, who was telling them stories from her youth in San Francisco. 15 years, Owen said, shaking his head. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here. I was just thinking the same thing, Zara said. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? You said I would travel with you. I do not think either of us realized then just how far we would travel together. Best journey I ever took, Owen said. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Thank you, Zara, for saying yes when I asked you to trust me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I did not even know I was missing. You saved me that day, Zara said softly. But you have been saving me ever since, every single day. You have given me a home, a family, a purpose. You have given me love like I never imagined existed. I am the one who should be thanking you. Then we will thank each other, Owen said, and kissed her with a tenderness that still made her heart skip even after 15 years of marriage. As they stood there wrapped in each other's arms, with the sounds of their children's laughter drifting out from inside, and the familiar beauty of the valley spread out before them, Zara felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life had not turned out anything like she had planned all those years ago when she set out for Oregon. It had turned out so much better. She had been left behind in the dust, abandoned and alone. But from that moment of despair had come everything good in her life. Owen had ridden into her life and offered her a choice: stay stranded or trust him to lead her to safety. She had chosen trust, and that choice had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life that was richer and fuller than anything she had dared to dream. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of family life. James grew into a capable young man who worked the ranch alongside his father, already showing signs of the rancher he would become. He was 18 now, tall and broad-shouldered, with Owen's steady temperament and Zara's quick mind. He had begun courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sensible girl named Margaret who seemed well-suited to ranch life. Emma, at 15, was still adventurous and bold, but she had also developed a talent for breaking horses that amazed even Owen. She had a natural way with animals, a gentleness combined with firm authority that made even the most skittish colt settle under her hands. She talked about starting her own training operation someday, and neither Zara nor Owen doubted she would do it. Thomas, at 13, had proven to be the scholar of the family. He devoured every book he could get his hands on, and had announced his intention to attend college back east when he was old enough. Zara encouraged this dream, even though she knew it would be hard to see him leave. She wanted her children to have choices, to pursue their passions wherever they led. Grace, now 10, was growing into a sweet-natured girl who loved music and art, and seemed to have inherited Zara's gift for teaching. She spent hours helping her younger cousins, and the children of ranch hands learned their letters, showing a patience and creativity that reminded Zara of her own early days in the Silverton schoolhouse. The ranch had expanded significantly over the years. Owen had purchased adjoining land as it became available, and they now ran a substantial operation with a dozen hands working under James and Owen's supervision. The horse herd had grown to over 200 head, and they had become known throughout Colorado for producing quality stock. Zara had also expanded her own activities beyond the ranch. She had helped establish a lending library in Silverton, organizing donation drives and fundraisers to build a collection of books available to the whole community. She volunteered at the church, taught Sunday school, and served on various committees aimed at improving life in the growing town. She found fulfillment in these activities, in using her education and energy to help others, but the heart of her life remained the ranch and her family. No matter how busy she got with outside activities, she always made sure to be present for the daily rituals of family life. Breakfast together, evening meals where everyone shared the events of their day, the quiet hour before bed when she and Owen would sit together and talk. Owen was now in his early 50s, his hair graying at the temples and his face lined from years of sun and wind. But to Zara, he was still the handsome cowboy who had stopped to help a stranded woman all those years ago. His eyes still sparkled with humor, his touch still made her pulse quicken, his voice still had the power to comfort her after a hard day. They had faced their share of sorrows over the years. Owen's mother had passed away, and though he had been estranged from his father for years, the loss still hit him hard. Sarah Chen had died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, and Zara had wept at the funeral for the woman who had become like a mother to her. Several neighbors and friends had been lost to accidents, illness, or simply the hard realities of frontier life, but they had also experienced profound joys. They had seen their children grow into capable, thoughtful individuals. They had watched Silverton transform from a rough mining camp into a proper town with schools, churches, shops, and civic institutions. They had built something lasting, both in their family and in their community. On a crisp autumn morning when Zara was 42 and Owen was 51, they stood together watching James ride off with Margaret, who was now his wife of 6 months. The young couple was heading to a neighboring ranch to look at some breeding stock, and they made a handsome pair, competent and confident in their saddles. "Our baby is all grown up," Owen said, though there was pride rather than sadness in his voice. "They all are," Zara said. Even Grace, their youngest, was becoming a young woman, more interested in books and music than dolls and games. "Where did the time go?" "I have been wondering that myself," Owen admitted. He turned to look at her, and his expression was soft. "But I would not trade a single day of it. Not the hard times, not the sorrows. All of it brought us here to this moment." "Neither would I," Zara said. She thought back to that desperate day 23 years ago when her world had fallen apart in the dust. She could hardly recognize that frightened young woman now. Life had shaped her, challenged her, and ultimately fulfilled her in ways she never could have anticipated. That evening, with the family gathered around the dinner table, Zara looked at each beloved face and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Emma was telling a funny story about a colt who had outsmarted her that afternoon. Thomas was debating some point of philosophy with Owen, who was holding his own despite Thomas's superior formal education. Grace was helping clear the dishes, humming under her breath. James and Margaret had returned and were sharing news about the horses they had seen. This was everything that mattered, not wealth or status or adventures in distant places. The people she loved gathered around her table, safe and healthy and happy. The ranch that she and Owen had built together through years of hard work and determination. The community they were part of, the land they had made their home. After dinner, as had become their custom over the years, Zara and Owen walked out to the porch to watch the sunset. It was their time, sacred and uninterrupted, when they reconnected after the busyness of the day. They sat in the chairs Owen had built years ago, holding hands and watching the sky turn from blue to gold to purple. "I was thinking today about that first night we camped together," Owen said. "Do you remember? You were so proper and careful, and I was trying so hard not to scare you." Zara laughed. "I was terrified, not of you really, but of the situation. I had no idea if I was making a terrible mistake or the best decision of my life." "And which was it?" Owen asked, though the teasing tone told her he already knew the answer. "The best decision, obviously," Zara said. She squeezed his hand. "You asked me to travel with you, and I did. We have been traveling together ever since." "The best traveling companion a man could ask for," Owen said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Zara Dalton, more today than I did yesterday and more tomorrow than I do today." "I love you too," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Always and forever." They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of their children going about their evening routines, the comfortable noises of home. A cool breeze whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of coming winter. Zara thought about how her life had unfolded from that single moment when Owen had offered her hope in her darkest hour. She thought about all the choices they had made together, the challenges they had overcome, the love they had nurtured and protected through the years. She thought about the family they had created, the legacy they were leaving. The wagon train had left her behind in the dust all those years ago, and at the time it had felt like the end of everything. But it had actually been the beginning. The beginning of the greatest adventure of her life, the greatest love story she could have imagined. Owen had offered her a chance, and she had taken it, and from that choice had blossomed everything beautiful in her life. As she sat there with Owen's hand warm in hers and the familiar mountains standing guard around their valley, Zara felt complete. This was home. This was love. This was the life she was meant to live, and she would not have changed a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. The seasons turned, bringing them into another winter, another spring. Owen and Zara grew older, their hair graying, their faces gaining new lines. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that neither time nor hardship could extinguish. They watched their children continue to grow and make their own ways in the world. They welcomed grandchildren, first from James and Margaret, then from Emma, who married a fellow horse trainer and settled on a ranch of her own nearby. Thomas did go east for college, but he returned after graduating, unable to stay away from the mountains and family he loved. He became a teacher in Silverton, carrying on his mother's legacy of education. Grace married a doctor who set up practice in town, and she used her musical gifts to bring beauty to the community through a church choir she organized and directed. Through it all, the Double D Ranch remained the center of their universe, the place where family gathered for holidays and celebrations, where memories were made and traditions were kept. The valley remained as beautiful as ever, a constant reminder of the natural majesty that had first drawn Owen to settle here, on their 30th wedding anniversary. Surrounded by children and grandchildren, Owen stood to make a toast. 30 years ago, I married the woman who changed my life, he said, his voice strong despite his years. I found her in the middle of nowhere, stranded and alone, and I told her she would travel with me. I had no idea then that she would become my whole world, that together we would build something so beautiful and lasting. Zara Sullivan, who became Zara Dalton, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Here is to 30 years and to many more to come. There were cheers and tears, and Zara stood to kiss her husband while their family applauded. Looking around at all the faces she loved, at the home they had built, at the life they had created, Zara felt that she had everything she could ever want. Years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brings. Owen's health began to decline when he was in his mid-60s, his body worn from decades of hard physical labor. He could no longer work the ranch as he once had, but he supervised from horseback and passed his knowledge on to James and the grandchildren who showed interest in ranching. Zara's own body showed the effects of age, with aches in her joints and a tiredness that came more easily than it once had. But they faced these challenges with the same partnership that had characterized their entire marriage. They supported each other, adapted to their changing abilities, and found new ways to contribute and stay engaged with life. They spent more time on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, sharing stories and memories, simply being together. One evening, when they were both in their 70s and had been married for more than 40 years, Owen turned to Zara with a serious expression. "I want you to know something," he said. "Whatever time I have left, whether it is days or years, every moment has been worth it because I spent it with you. You made my life complete, Zara. I hope you know that." "I know it," Zara said, her eyes bright with tears, "because you did the same for me. You gave me everything, Owen. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love that sustained me through everything. I was lost when you found me, and you have been my compass ever since." They held each other close, two people who had weathered decades together and whose love had only grown deeper with time. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in glorious colors one more time, and they watched it together as they had done countless times before. Owen lived another 5 years, remaining sharp and engaged until near the end. He passed away peacefully one spring morning with Zara holding his hand and their children gathered around. His last words were to tell Zara he loved her and that he would wait for her. Zara mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the life they had shared. At his funeral, she stood before the crowded church and spoke of the man who had stopped to help a stranger and ended up giving her the world. She spoke of his kindness, his strength, his humor, his unwavering love. There was not a dry eye in the building. After Owen's death, Zara continued to live on the ranch, now run by James with help from his children. She spent her days in the garden with her grandchildren, writing letters to distant friends and family. She found comfort in the familiar surroundings, in the mountains that had been part of her life for so long, in the memories that lived in every corner of the property. She lived another 8 years after Owen's passing, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She saw several great-grandchildren born, watched her family continue to grow and flourish. She remained the matriarch of the family, respected and loved by all. When Zara finally passed away at the age of 81, it was peacefully in her sleep, in the bedroom she had shared with Owen for so many years. Her children laid her to rest beside him in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, with the mountains standing eternal guard around them. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren spoke of her courage, her determination, her capacity for love. They told the story of how she had been abandoned by a wagon train and rescued by a cowboy, and how that chance encounter had led to a legacy of family and love that would endure for generations. The Double D Ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations. The valley continued its eternal cycle of seasons, and the mountains stood unchanged. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set in glory over the peaks, it was easy to imagine two spirits sitting on the old porch together, holding hands and watching the sky, their journey complete but their love eternal. The story of Zara Sullivan and Owen Dalton became part of family lore, told and retold to each new generation. It became a story about courage in the face of adversity, about the power of kindness and compassion, about love that endures through all challenges. It was a story about a wagon train that left a woman behind in the dust, and the cowboy who said she would travel with him now, and how that simple act of decency became the foundation for something beautiful and lasting. And through the years, the message of their story remained clear. That sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the doorways to our greatest blessings, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that a life built on partnership and mutual respect can weather any storm and create a legacy that lasts forever.